Hi, everybody. Welcome to SCAD Savannah Film Festival. My name is Riz Kinane. I'm a correspondent at Entertainment Weekly magazine, and today we are here to talk all things Uncle Frank. And I am joined by the writer-director, Alan Ball, and cast member Paul Bettany, Sophia Willis, and Peter McVitie. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. We wanted to kick things off, Alan. I wanted to start with you. Tell me a little bit about where the idea came from for this movie, like how it kind of all started percolating in your mind.
When I was 33 years old, I was living in New York City, and I took a trip home to Georgia, which is where I was born and grew up, to come out of the closet to my mother. And she surprised me by saying, well, I blame your father for this because I think he was that way too. I don't know if that's true. He was already dead, so I don't want to be outing my father posthumously, but she told me that, and it made me start thinking. And the next day we were driving around North Georgia visiting relatives, and we drove past a lake, and she very nonchalantly said, that's where Sam Lassiter drowned. And I'd never heard the person, so I said, who's Sam Lassiter? And she went, he was a real good friend of your daddy's. And later I found out that my dad had accompanied Sam's body on a train back to their hometown of Asheville, North Carolina. And I just always thought about, well, what if it was true? And there was this guy and there was this tragic thing happening, so early in their lives that Frank would have to deal with for the rest of his life. And it just sort of grew from there. My inner Tennessee Williams took over.
Love that. Did you start writing it years ago then and come back to it, or was it something you completely finished years ago?
I completely finished it years ago. I didn't do it right then. It sort of percolated for years, and then I guess it was about 4 or 5 years ago that I really sat down to write it in earnest and finished it, and had a script that then started the long slog uphill of trying to get it made. That took a few years too.
Right. So it wasn't like this felt like the right time. It just was when you had time and where it all kind of came together.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the way I work. I don't really plan things. I just sort of trust my instincts, which has worked for me in the past, and it has also totally not worked for me.
I mean, true for everyone, I'm sure. So did you always want it to be a period piece set in the 70s and frame it with this uncle-niece relationship, or did that go through any kind of different iterations?
Well, I think it had to be a period piece because if it was today, and it just seems so much more unlikely that it would be as, they would face the kind of hurdles they faced as young men back in the 40s, which is when Frank and Sam knew each other. And it always felt like a period piece, I guess, because I'm basing it on this idea of my father and the time. I don't know. It just organically came out in the 70s. It didn't feel like something that would really make that much sense if it was totally present day.
Right. Totally. So for you guys on the cast, when you first get the script comes your way, what were kind of your initial reactions? And was it like an immediate, yes, I need to do this project?
Oh, no.
Well, we should say that Peter's also a producer, so.
That's so good. Good. You go.
What's her?
You go. Sophia, you want to go?
I almost immediately said yes. I love the script. I thought it was great. Whenever I get a few scripts, I always look through them, see if it's a good story to tell, if it's a good director, the good characters, and it's an interesting character to get into. And I really loved her, and I really loved the story, and got to really be a part of it. So I said yes almost immediately. I don't really have much of a story to tell with that.
Well, for you guys, Paul, did you feel like there was something you really connected with Frank himself, or just the story in general?
Yeah, and initially I was a little frightened of it. I have a similar sort of experience with my father, who came out at 63 and then went back into the closet just before he died, so he would be let past the pearly gates in his head. And it was a very sad end to what had been a very courageous last episode. And it gave me pause to do it, because I would have to sort of confront some of the things I felt about my dad and the consequences of his struggle with his own identity that reverberated in my own in the way he handled my upbringing. But in the end, for me, it just felt like it was sort of, it would be beautiful to make a story of, well, what if he had been able to come to terms with that, and what would that have done for his life? And he was so close, and I really liked the idea of telling that story rather than the rather bleak, miserable actual story of that. So that's a long way of saying. Initially when I read it, I was reticent, and then I reread it and I went, actually, I think this feels like a really good story for right now, a family with very different ideas about how to live one's life, finding a way to heal and be together. It felt pretty, well, it feels pretty urgent right now. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have to do dialect coaching to get the accent right?
You know what? I didn't this time.
Oh, just came to you.
I didn't do dialect coaching this time because the person that I always work with wasn't available, but he did come in and spot the film for us afterwards and check for gross accent misconduct on my.
Which I'm sure there were not many of. Peter, Wally's probably my favorite character ever written, maybe. He's so incredibly kind and big-hearted and just patient and wonderful, but also has a really challenging backstory of his own. Was that, the fact that he has so many layers to him, was that part of the appeal in playing the character?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, first of all, I don't get to play parts like that, who are kind and sort of warm and generous of spirit and stuff like that. So that was appealing to do. I mean, it was kind of sort of new for me. And then the other thing is that, on the surface, he comes with no issues, but I think he does struggle with certain things because he has an intimate relationship with his family, even though he's not out to them. And I thought, that's interesting. Like, he's capable of sort of having an intimate relationship with his family. And in this culture, we're sort of used to think that intimacy always comes with saying everything, divulging everything to your closest. I thought that part of it was kind of interesting. His phone calls with his mom and whatnot. We see how much love there is, but yet he's not capable of coming out to her or to his, brother, I think. So the fact that he, on some level, chose Frank to live through Frank vicariously in a way, like he was pushing him to come out to his family, and that was his way of achieving that, the closest thing he could do to achieve being able to come out to someone. And I think that was the driving force for Wally, now that I think about it,
Totally.
But
he's such a great character.
Oh, yeah, he's so loving. I mean, to be so loving towards his partner was like, wow, to me was like amazing, if we could learn.
Yeah, he's aspirational for sure. Okay, so once you guys get on set, how is Alan Ball as a director? How would you compare him to, I just want you to all say lovely things about Alan over here, but how does that compare to like working with other directors on different projects?
Well, Alan, first off, Alan had written a really beautiful script with what I thought was an amazing construct. The turn in the third act, where you realize the root of Uncle Frank's guilt, and it subverts your expectations, I thought was just fantastic. And I think he really was in love with the object, and you can only hope to work with director that is in love with the object that they're making. Oftentimes they're not, and I think you could feel that on set, and his willingness to open that up and be collaborative, and yet maintain a very clear vision of what his expectations are. It was for me, a very easy working relationship, and I adored every minute of it. He trusted me, I trusted him, and I feel that way about all of the actors and production in general. It was a pretty magical, very short amount of time.
That's lovely to hear, though. Alan, for you, did you always know you wanted to direct it when you were writing it? Could you imagine someone else doing it, or did you know you had to be the one kind of helming it?
I always wanted to direct it. I've only directed one other movie prior to this, so I'm sure other people could have directed it and done a lovely job. But it's even though it's not autobiographical, it's a very personal story, and I really felt like I wanted to direct it, and luckily I got to.
Yay! Congrats. I wanted to bring up the rest of the cast that aren't here today as well, because they're just incredible actors and huge names. You have Judy Greer, Steve Zahn, Margot Martindale, Stephen Root, Lois Smith. How did they all kind of come on board? Did that take any convincing, or were they just like, yes, absolutely? And then how was working with them for you guys?
Well, for me, I had worked with Lois before, and I had worked with Stephen Root before. They both did stints on True Blood. I just actually, called these people's agents and said, I've got a script of a movie that is coming together, and we're going to make it in the spring, and I'd love for them to consider it, and got the script to them, and fortunately for me and for the movie, they all said yes. It was pretty great. Those are the first people you go to, and then they say yes.
Yeah. How was like being on set for some of those days where it was like the whole family together? How was being on set with everybody those days? Was there any kind of like hilarious stories or anything?
We shot a sort of scene right at the end of the movie where everybody's in the garden together, and Steve Zahn was being outrageous, and I'm so glad there's no actual recorded dialogue, because he is outrageous. But for me, it was a real thrill. I love working with all the cast, and it's awful picking one out, but I fell in love with Lois Smith when I first saw East of Eden, and to be on set with this person who was still so enthusiastic and prepared and excited to be working she's amazing, and one of my sort of acting idols. So
that's so cool. How is it for you, Sophia, with like all these kind of more experienced actors than you? Did you just get to like learn a ton from being around them?
Yeah, it did. It felt like I was a little bit at acting school. I just very immersed experience of just everyone around me are just amazing, experienced actors. And I was there as well somehow. So, it was really fun. I got to watch these people act, and I like being when learning things. I like to be one-on-one, getting to see it happen. So just being able to work with them, I feel like I learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure. And Alan, you wanted Sophia for the role, right? You saw her on Sharp Objects and were like, she needs to be in this.
Well, I saw her on Sharp Objects, and I went, who is that girl? I can't take my eye off her. And then I did some research, and she was the perfect age. At that time, she was exactly between Beth at 14 and Beth at 18. And then I rented Stephen King's It, the big horror movie, and went, wow, she can carry a whole movie. So let's try to get her. And we sent her the script, and she responded.
So great. Okay, from nice kind of cheery things to maybe a little bit bleaker, I wanted to ask you, Alan, about the reading of the will scene. Was that also, Paul, like how you kind of, when you first read that, what was your reaction, and like, did you prepare for it in any way? But just, was it always as harsh as it is in the final movie?
Script wise, yes, it was
brutal.
It's pretty brutal.
How was it for you, Paul, like getting into that kind of mindset for that scene? Because, it stays with you after you watch the movie.
It was, terrifying. Not actually terrifying, but terrifying in that way that that there's this scene coming up where you that is not going to be cut from the movie because you were bad. Sometimes you can be in a scene where you're bad and it can go, but the reading of the will is kind of a difficult moment. So that in one of the two takes that you're going to get, because time is is always running out on movies like this, you've got to hit something that is at least acceptable, and a genius editor is able to cut around all of your bad acting stuff. So it was those moments you have pressure, like the graveyard scene. You have it's coming up, and you're like, oh God, and you want to delay it another day, but they come, and you got to try and be there and be present and all of that. It was thankfully there are like 8 other people in the scene that you can cut to. So.
Well, I mean, the graveyard scenes may be the opposite. That really is just you and the grave for a good couple of minutes there. How
you can cut to the grave when I'm being
just the grave zone. How was that scene? I imagine, it's hard to watch, so I imagine it was pretty grueling to shoot. Did it take a lot of takes? Was it something that you just kind of like got done and over with?
I asked for it to be at the end of the day so that I could go home.
Sure.
And I didn't really think I'd be that shootable on after it anyway. So I asked for the scene to be placed at the end of the call sheet at the end of the day, so that I could go home and have a beer. That was my big plan.
I remember Paul showed up and he was in that zone, and I was like talking to DP saying, hurry up, we got to start shooting, because he was there. And
that's right. Actually, yes. You also, he wanted to shoot the wide because of the light, and you went, let's shoot the close up now, and then we'll shoot the wide later and sacrifice the light, which is an amazing thing for a director to do, because they often don't do that, and it's so nice when somebody recognizes that now is the moment, and we this is as good as it's going to get. Let's move to wide shots later.
Nice. Well, Peter and Sophia, you're both in that scene towards the end as well. How was it just kind of being on set for that and witnessing all kind of go down?
It was great. I mean, it was just being in the moment. It was just right there, and I came with my own stuff, and he was already there, and it just happened. I mean, those are, you thank God that it did work that day. So, just part of the job.
Totally. Truly heartbreaking just watching it. So great job for everybody involved. Does anybody have a favorite scene that's maybe more like, there's so many moments of true humor in this. Like, I laughed out loud multiple times. Is there any scene that you guys are really fond of just because it was fun and lighthearted to shoot? Sophia, I'm going to talk about Euro the Mechanic. Maybe that was hilarious.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yelling at that man. I don't think I ever had a scene where I get to like really be angry at someone. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. Another one one of my favorite scenes to watch is the scene with you two, when you find that Peter is driving in the car behind us the whole time. Your conversation is great. I always loved watching that scene specifically. And I'm there as well. I'm just way back in the background to watch the whole thing, which was also a lot of fun.
I really liked your nonplus. You think the scene about Uncle Frank coming out to his niece is going to be about Uncle Frank, and I really love that it plays so much on your nonplussed face as you begin to put things together in your head. I love in your little drunk head, by the way.
Yeah, right. That was also a fun scene to shoot.
At that point, I really
pretend to throw up for.
And everybody having their own agenda, Wally being, I can't believe he's going to do this. Her being, I can't believe he is this, and how is this happening right now in a toilet in New York City is really made me laugh. Really
so great. And then the boyfriend as well, where she's like, "Wait, what was that? What by Bruce?" That cracked me up.
Yeah.
So good. One thing I really loved about this movie was that there is a happy ending, essentially happy anyway, not perfect, but I was really scared watching it in parts that it was going to spiral and they weren't going to end in a good place. So when you were writing it, Alan, was that always something that was important to you? And then when you guys were reading the script, were you surprised by that, or were you relieved, or how did it play out the way you thought it was gonna?
Well, I just know most of the sort of classic movies about gay men and gay relationships usually end with one of them dying. Mm-hmm. You think of Brokeback Mountain, you think of A Single Man, and they're all great movies, but they always end on this note of like tragedy. And while there's certainly a lot of tragedy in the movie, I wanted Frank and Wally to be together at the end, because they are, the love of each other's lives, and they are. That's it. And I didn't want. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying yes. It was always important that it didn't end in a completely bleak place, because I just don't think it has to.
No, totally. For you guys, was it surprising or a relief or anything when you were reading it?
No, I kind of like that, actually, because it just tells us that there is hope, and hope is so important. I mean, already Sam dies in the movie. Already there is a tragedy in some lives. And, that was his first love and whatnot, but this is like more of a mature love, and there's hope for it. And the fact that he gets to get introduced to his family, that part of it too. I mean, it's, some people might think it's a bit on the nose, but I found that every time I read it, I cried my eyes out, like every single time I read it, and I've read it many times. So that tells me that the writer's instinct was right on in that regard. I mean, yeah, it could be a different movie. It's not like just one formula. But in this case, I think it's just very heartwarming and very hopeful and optimistic and positive. And I think these are important qualities to have right now.
I think that's right. And I think that the acceptance of his mother's acceptance of who he is, and his family's in general's acceptance of who he is, but also his acceptance of who he is really, it feels really special. And I'm not going to say unique, because I don't have enough knowledge, but I haven't seen that movie, a gay love story that ends with them having a future together. And like I said earlier, I just think, and it's, just to reiterate really what Peter was saying, is right now, I think it's a really wonderful antidote. The idea that people who have families who have very different ideas about the way lives should be led, finding common ground together feels like something necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree with Paul there when he said that. I do think I love the ending. I love the script, and I love how it's lighthearted. It's something, especially during this time right now, we really need a movie like that. I mean, that's the only thing I've been watching now, because I've only been wanting to watch movies that are, uplifting, something that makes you feel better. So this is like the perfect time for it to come out. And like I watched the trailer came out today, and I watched it at least 20 times. Because I when I watched it, it just reminded me of shooting it, and just me reading it all over again. And I was like, I keep, whenever it asks me, why do you want to act and everything, I never really can come up with like an actual response or a sentence. Just, I enjoyed it. But when I watched it, I was like, yeah, this is why I want to act, because I get to make things like this. Yeah.
That's awesome. And also, yeah, so important right now. You're right. Everybody's right. I think this is a movie that everybody needs to go see in the next few weeks. So I'm very excited for it to come out. We're running low on time, so I just wanted to ask really fast. There will be a lot of SCAD students watching this. So I wonder if you guys have any advice that you were given in your career that you feel like would be helpful to share with them, because there'll be a lot of aspiring writers and directors and actors in the audience. It can be something small or silly.
I personally got a really good piece of advice from my agent like 20 years ago, and he told me I needed to write a script that he could as a writing sample, and I pitched him 2 romantic comedies, and the third movie I pitched him was American Beauty, which was pretty hard to pitch because it's not like a 1-sentence pitch. And I expected him to say, write one of those romantic comedies, but he said, you should write the other one because that's the one that you clearly feel passionate about. Mm-hmm. And that was a really great piece of advice for me at the time. I've since written many things that I feel passionate about that have gone nowhere, but but I still feel like that's the right thing to do for me, as opposed to thinking about, will this sell? Is there a place for it in the marketplace? What is the audience? Blah blah blah. Because there's other people who do that, much better than I do. I just try to write stuff that I care about. And that was the best piece of advice I got.
Awesome. Worked out for you. Anybody else have any for acting maybe?
Don't be an asshole. Really is a really good piece of advice. Very hard when you're on set and there's an AD running around because they've been told to find out where you are, and that people want to know where you are, and then it's I think I've watched people really lose their head about that, and you can begin to feel very important, and behaving well I think is incredibly important, because people are still going to make movies with you if you get their movie financed and you behave bad. But everybody's got their hand on the rug ready to pull it when you're not that person. And if you weren't that person and your career's on the skids, people will reach their hand down and help you back up if you've behaved well. And you have to monitor that yourself, because nobody else is going to.
Love that. Don't be an asshole. Got it. Anything else?
Well, I read something last night which I thought was, it's not that innovative or anything, but I thought the way he put it was interesting. It's a quote from Winston Churchill, and he said, success is not stable and failure is not fatal. The only thing is just to keep on doing it. That's where courage lies. And I thought, it's not original, but it's still something that we need to hear on and on again, because, we get very much dragged down very easily, with our temperament. So it just keeps you on going, and just be passionate about what you do. Do it for the passion, for the love, not for the other stuff.
Awesome. Sophia?
Well, let's I think a lot of people I know who come up to me and say, because I go to an acting school. I used to go to an acting school. I graduated high school, but but a lot of people always, ask like, I've been acting for this long and I haven't really gotten a job yet, and just wondering what you did to get a job. And it's good to remember that there's not a, if you don't get a job, it's not because you didn't do well or anything. It's just that you weren't fit for that role. Somewhere out there's going to be a role fit for you, and it's part of this job. 90% of it is trying to get a job. And you spend like one of those few months working on it, then it's back on the road again on trying to find a job again. And it does feel a little bit like unemployment. It does feel like you're trying to get a job just to work on it for a few months. But that's what I love about it, and that's pretty much all there is. I spend most of my time auditioning. It's not like the first job I audition I get and it's great, and it's not always that. I've been turned down many times, but that's just a part of it, and so don't get discouraged. I guess my thing is my advice.
You know what, Sophia? I think that's really sage of you. And I remember reading a interview with Robert De Niro about being a young actor, and he said I never got disheartened because I knew there were a million reasons before they got to whether I was any good or not that I wasn't getting those roles, and that really, hearing Robert De Niro say that really helped me.
Amazing. Well, on that note, I think that's all we have time for, guys. But thank you so much to the writer, director, and cast of Uncle Frank for joining us. And stay tuned to SCAD Savannah Film Festival for more coverage. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye now.